This happened last summer. I was 32, and I'm no stranger to the outdoors. As a high school teacher, I often planned camping trips with friends to escape the stress of school. I chose a beautiful campsite by a quiet lake, surrounded by tall pines. I thought it would be a perfect getaway. Maybe I should have checked the history of the place before we went. I never stopped thinking about it after we came back. The first night was calm. We set up our tents, had dinner, and shared stories around the campfire. Everything felt normal. But just after midnight, something rustled in the trees. It wasn't too loud, but it pulled my attention. My friends laughed it off as a raccoon or deer, but I felt something was off. For a moment, I thought I saw something moving at the edge of the trees. It was gone before I could blink. I told myself I was imagining things. The next day was fine. We hiked around the lake, enjoyed the sun, and I tried to ignore the strange feeling. In the evening, we cooked hot dogs and played games. But when the sun set, that uneasy feeling returned. I noticed my backpack was in a different spot than where I'd left it. Maybe I just forgot? I doubted it. The second night, we settled in for stories again. I glanced toward the trees. It seemed darker somehow, like shadows were deeper than they should be. The firelight flickered, and my mind raced. Was I imagining it? Suddenly, a whisper broke through the night. I couldn't make out the words, but it sent chills down my spine. Did you hear that? I asked my friends. They nodded, looking uneasy. It's probably just the wind, I said, trying to reassure them. But even as I spoke, I wasn't convinced. Their faces were pale, and I felt my heart race. Over the next couple of days, things got weirder. I found strange symbols carved into the trees' markings I'd never seen before. The shadows at night seemed to grow stronger, almost like they were watching us. I told myself we were just letting our imaginations run wild, but deep down, I felt a fear I couldn't ignore. Then came the last night. We were all on edge. The whisper returned, louder this time, echoing through the trees. Felt like something was circling us. I looked around, but my friends looked just as frightened. The tension was thick in the air. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. We packed up in a hurry, racing away from that campsite. I didn't look back. As we drove away, I felt that strange sensation that something was watching us, that something had been lurking just out of sight the whole time. I think about it often now. Maybe it was just paranoia, or maybe it was real. I still wonder what really happened out there. Sometimes, I still see those shadows at night, shifting just beyond the trees. I often hear whispers when the wind blows. Did we truly escape? Or did we bring something back with us? The weeks passed, but the events of that camping trip lingered in my mind like a bad dream. I tried to shake the feeling off. I went back to teaching and my routine life resumed. But every so often, I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder, glancing into the dark corners of my classroom or the shadows of my home. One evening, I received a call from Jenna, one of the friends who had joined the trip. She sounded frantic. "You need to come over," she said, her voice shaky. Something happened to me. I rushed to her apartment, my stomach twisting with unease. When she opened the door, I could see panic etched across her face. "I've been hearing things," she stated, her eyes wide. "At night. Feels like something is watching me." Those words echoed what I'd felt. "You too?" I asked, my heart racing. "What do you mean?" "I thought it was just me going crazy," she replied, biting her lip. "But last night I woke up to whispers. Not just the sounds, but I felt cold air against my skin, like someone was standing right next to me." Jenna led me to her living room. It was cluttered, but the air was heavy with a thick unease, not just from her stories. On the wall, I noticed a large, jagged mark scratched into the paint. It was like an unfamiliar symbol, a rough version of what we'd seen on the trees. "Where did that come from?" I asked sharply. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I think it's connected. I have felt it since we got back." My thoughts raced. Something had followed us. Something had attached itself to us on that trip. We both jumped when her phone buzzed loudly on the table. A text message. She opened it and her face went pale. "It's from Mark," she said, reading the message. "He says he's been feeling it too. He's in his backyard right now, says he sees shadows moving. Panic welled within me. Do we call him? We can't let him be alone. Let us go, Jenna said, her face set in determination. We sped across town, an uneasy silence filling the car. I felt a growing dread. What would we find? And what if that something was still following us? When we arrived, Mark stood nervously by the porch, looking up into the trees. His hands were stuffed in his pockets, glancing around like a lost child. I'm glad you two came, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I keep hearing whispers. They get louder at night. I thought I was losing it. As we exchanged our troubles, the air seemed to thicken, hanging over us like a thick fog. And suddenly, just like on that last night in the woods, the whispers started again. Soft, barely audible, rustling through the leaves. I felt a chill run down my spine. We shouldn't do this, I said, panic rising. We shouldn't be here. That when everything fell silent. No whispers, no wind. Just an eerie calm. Then I saw it, a dark figure flitting between the trees. I could barely breathe. Did you see that? I shouted, pointing. Mark and Jenna froze, their eyes wide. But it was too late. The darkness had already begun to close in on us. The moment the darkness thickened around us, all of my instincts screamed to run. But my feet felt glued to the ground. Mark and Jenna didn't move either. We were all caught in a web of fear, staring into the woods as if willing the shadows to reveal what lay within them. Then the whispers grew louder. They weren't just in the wind. It felt like they were swirling around us, closing in tighter. My heart thudded against my ribs, each beat punctuated by the tension in the air. Jenna clutched my arm, squeezing it hard enough to leave bruises. What do we do? She whispered. I opened my mouth to reply, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't have a plan, and just like that, our safety felt like a fragile thing. That's when I heard it, a distinct crackling sound, like twigs snapping underfoot. It was coming from just beyond the tree line, and it wasn't subtle. My gaze darted to where the sound originated. Mark, I croaked, my voice trembling. Are you hearing that? Mark nodded, his expression pale. I think something's out there, he said. Suddenly, a figure stepped into the faint light of Mark's porch. It was a woman, tall and gaunt, with wild hair and clothes that seemed to cling to her skin. Her eyes gleamed, reflecting the light like a predator. A wave of dread washed over me as I realized she seemed to be watching us. For a moment, I couldn't move. Run! I finally yelled, breaking the paralysis. We bolted toward the house, adrenaline pumping. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was right behind us. What was that? Jenna shouted as we stumbled over each other, scrambling up the porch steps. I don't know, I gasped. Get inside. Mark flung the door open and we barreled inside, slamming it shut behind us. I locked the door, my hands trembling. For a few moments, we huddled together in the dim interior, our breaths coming in short gasps as we stood there, trying to process what had just happened. I caught sight of Jenna's face, pale and ghost-like. That woman, she looked lost, like she came from those woods. She whispered, "Do you think she saw us?" Mark said, fear creeping into his voice. "I don't know what she wanted," I admitted, gripping the edges of the table. "But I don't think it's over." A sudden thud against the door made us jump. It was followed by the soft sound of whispering, this time clearer. I could make out a few words, "Come outside and help me." The cold chill settled back into my bones. "We can't go out there," I said, backing away. "We don't know what it is." But the whispers grew more insistent, almost pleading. "What if she needs help?" Mark countered, his brows knit with concern. "No," I snapped. "She could be luring us. It's a trap." Before I could say anything else, the power flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. My heart raced. The whispers seemed to seep into the very walls of the house now. Shadows danced along the edges of the room. "Do you think," Jenna began, her voice barely above a whisper, "do you think it's connected to what happened at the campsite?" "I think we're going to find out," I said, eyes darting toward the door. That's when we heard a loud crash from outside, followed by that same voice echoing through the darkness. "Let me in." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Something was trying to cross into our world and we were trapped in its grasp. I could barely breathe. My mind raced as the weight of our panic settled around us like a thick fog. Jenna was still whispering, shaking with fear, and Mark stood frozen, staring at the door. The whispering outside had taken on a frantic edge, desperately repeating, "Let me in." "Do you think she knows we're in here?" Jenna asked, her voice quaking. "I don't know, but we can't let her in," I replied, my throat dry. We had to stay focused. We need to find a way to defend ourselves. Mark turned toward the kitchen. "There has to be something we can use," he said. He moved slowly, his footsteps muffled against the wooden floor. I followed him, keeping my eyes locked on the door. Jenna stayed close to me, her breath shallow and quick. I glanced around the darkened kitchen, struggling to remember where Mark kept his weapons. There had to be something useful amongst the clutter. My fingers brushed against a heavy frying pan, and I gripped it tightly. Just as I turned back to Mark, we heard another loud thud, this time even louder. The door rattled as she pounded against it. "Let me in. Get back," I shouted, instinctively moving in front of Jenna. "We couldn't let her get through. Please," the voice begged. "I'm lost. I need help." There was a tremor in her tone, but I wasn't going to fall for it. We were all scared. It could be a ruse. "Don't listen," cautioned, but doubt crept in. What if she really needs help? A small voice in my head whispered, "Whatever she wants, it can't be good," Mark said, clutching a kitchen knife. "If she gets in, we might not get out." I nodded, tightening my grip on the frying pan. "We need to barricade the door. If she gets in..." Before I could finish, the sound of splintering would echoed throughout the house. The door shuddered violently, and I hitched a breath, heart racing. She was trying to break through. Then suddenly silence fell. The absence of sound was so shocking that it hit me like a cold wave. I strained to listen. The whispers had faded, leaving an uneasy stillness. "What happened?" Jenna whispered, looking terrified. "I don't know. I don't like this," I said, stepping cautiously toward the door. Right then, I saw it. A shadow darting past the window. I spun around. It was fast slipping in and out of sight like smoke. "Did you see that?" I exclaimed, heart pounding even harder now. Mark leaned closer to the window. "What was it?" "I don't know," I stammered. "But I think we're not alone." Jenna's eyes went wide. "Maybe there are more of them." We could hear rustling just outside, moving fast and silently. The whispers returned, but they were different now, unknowable, almost chaotic. "Help, come join us." I felt a chill run down my spine. I couldn't let fear control us. But what if that shadow was just the beginning? Before I could voice my thoughts, the lights flickered back on, only they were different. The soft bulb over the kitchen table cast a thin, eerie glow. "Look." Mark pointed towards the door. Blood dripped down the wood frame, pooling at the bottom. I swallowed hard. This was getting worse, and I was wondering if we'd even survive the night. That was when the shadow moved closer, appearing just outside the door. I took a step back as the whispering grew fainter, replaced by a low, grating sound. "They're coming." Panic surged through me. We had to act fast. I couldn't let them in. I would do anything to protect us. But part of me wondered, what if the worst had already arrived? I felt that chill settle deeper, and the sudden urge to flee bubbled beneath the surface. The whispers were like a distant hum now. I had to focus. "Mark," I said, grabbing his arm. "We need to push something against the door, something heavy." He nodded, glancing nervously toward the door where flecks of blood smeared the wood. "What about the kitchen table?" "Good idea," I replied. We rushed together, moving the sturdy table across the floor, the sound of wood scraping against wood sharp in the tense air. I glanced back at Jenna, who stood frozen, her eyes wide with fear. "Jenna, help us!" She sprang into action, and with effort, we managed to shove the table against the door just as another thud reverberated through the house. I held my breath. The barrier might hold, but for how long? "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "There's got to be another way." Moving to the back door, I pressed my face against the glass. Outside, darkness twisted into strange silhouettes, but I couldn't see what was lurking out there. Maybe we can sneak out. Mark shook his head. And run into whatever is out there. No way. Just as I turned back to him, the flickering lights overhead buzzed violently. I felt a jolt of fear as they exploded into darkness. Panic clawed at my throat. What the hell? We have to stay together. Jenna shouted, her voice nearly swallowed by the gloom. I could barely make out the shape of her face. Fear etched into every feature. Digital clocks blinked off, and the walls felt like they were closing in. Still gripping the frying pan, I strained to listen. Then I heard a faint rustling, like dry leaves shifting in the wind. It was coming from the other side of the table. My heart started pounding again. Did you hear that? Mark nodded, his expression grave. It's circling us. Panic surged. What do? We can't stay here. Before Mark could respond, we noticed shadows shifting just beyond the windows, moving in unnaturally twisted patterns. My stomach dropped as I realized they were not just passing shadows, but things that slithered on the edge of my vision. Suddenly, the kitchen door splintered, sending fragments flying across the room. I gasped, clenching the frying pan like it was the last line of defense. Run, I shouted. But another voice cut through, low and chilling, whispering, you can't escape. In that moment, everything changed. The sense of dread morphed into a palpable force, wrapping around us like a vice. I could feel eyes on me, on us, whatever watched from the trees. It had come closer. No, I screamed, backing away. No. Mark glanced toward the back door, his face pale. It's now or never, he urged. But just then, Jenna gasped. Look. I turned, just in time to see a figure standing in the doorway, backlit by the flickering light. It didn't step closer, but I could feel its presence, cold and suffocating. We can't let it in, I murmured, heart racing. I knew we had to decide in that moment. Fight or risk everything on a desperate escape. But the figure smiled, its grin twisted and malicious. It stepped forward, shadows peeling away to reveal more of its form. That's when I realized we weren't just dealing with one. Desperate, I shouted. We're not afraid of you. But deep down I knew. Fear wasn't just lingering. It was surging. And I was terrified we'd already lost. The figure in the doorway loomed ominously, its smile stretching impossibly wide. I felt the air thicken around us, the scent of damp earth and decay flooding my senses. My grip tightened around the frying pan, but my hands were shaking. Jenna, stay behind me, I said, instinctively stepping forward to shield her from the figure. Mark tilted his head, trying to peer around me. Are there more? He stuttered. I flicked my gaze towards the windows. Shadows flitted across the glass, their movements too fluid, too purposeful. I swallowed hard. We were surrounded. We can't fight them all, I said, barely able to think straight. My mind raced. We need a way out. Suddenly, the figure took another step forward, and a low growl trickled from its throat. You can't escape, it breathed, voice like gravel. The air grew cold, and I could see my breath fogging in the dim light. What do you want? I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. I could feel the weight of its gaze pressing down on me, almost tangible. It's not what we want, the figure replied, its grin widening. It's what you've invited. What does that mean? Mark chipped in, anger flaring behind his fear. But it didn't reply. Instead, it turned its head slightly, as if listening for something just beyond the walls. I took a step back, but that was a mistake. The shadows outside coalesced, merging into shapes that moved with rapid grace. Panic flared in my chest, and I glanced at Jenna. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the terror we all felt. Back to the table, I yelled, pulling Jenna with me. We stumbled backward, knocking into the furniture. The table held steady, but I didn't know how long that would last. The growl intensified, vibrating through the floorboards. Just when I thought we might be overwhelmed, a loud crash echoed from the back door, a branch splitting apart. They're coming, Mark muttered, his voice nearly breaking. In that moment of chaos, something unexpected happened. A bright light burst through the darkened windows, blinding us. I shielded my eyes, fear giving way to confusion. The figure recoiled, hissing at the light as if it were poison. "What is that?" Jenna yelled, squinting into the brightness. I could barely make out the form of a tall man standing outside, illuminated by a flashlight. His face was obscured, just a shadow among shadows, but his presence felt different. "Get back," he shouted, raising the light higher, sending the dark figures retreating like wind-driven leaves. "Get inside. Move." Without thinking, I grabbed Jenna's wrist and pulled her toward the back door, where Mark had already started to shield us with the remaining furniture. The tension broke as the oppressive darkness pulled away, but I could feel it lingering just beyond the threshold. Then everything went dark again. The figure inside the doorway ripped the last traces of light from the room, and a cold wind swept through the house. I caught a glimpse of the man, his face twisted in alarm, just as the shadows surged forward, stronger than before. "Run!" I screamed again, my voice fighting against the resurgence of darkness. I had to act fast before they closed in around us. With every ounce of strength, I pushed against the table, and Jenna and Mark followed suit. The door held for a heartbeat, but I could feel the pressure building. "Now!" I yelled, looking back toward my friends. We were going to break for the back doorway, but it felt like an eternity to get to safety. When I saw it something different among the shadows. A small, flickering figure darted toward us, limbs stretching unnaturally as it moved. And in that fleeting moment, I knew we were in deeper than we had ever expected. As we raced toward the back door, the small flickering figure grew closer. My heart pounded in my chest. It moved in erratic bursts, like a flame caught in the wind. I couldn't tell what it was, only that it was heading straight for us. "Don't stop," I shouted, urging Jenna and Mark to pick up the pace. The pressure from the front door rattled louder, splintering the wood with each push. I felt the cold air biting at our heels, a reminder that we were running out of time. "Go, go!" Mark yelled, his voice strained. I could see the worry etched across his face, that and pure desperation. We were almost there, but the weight of the shadows bore down heavily, threatening to pull us back into their grip. Just when I thought we might escape, a sharp pain shot through my ankle. I stumbled, feeling something grab onto me from behind. I turned, only to see the flickering figure had morphed into a grotesque shape. It twisted and lengthened, its grin mocking me as it tangled my feet like spider silk. "Help!" I cried, flailing. Jenna and Mark whipped around, eyes wide with horror. "Hold on." Mark lunged back toward me, but it was like moving through molasses. The shadows seemed to sap our strength, slowing every movement. With a surge of instinct, I kicked at the figure's grasp, feeling nothing but the thick air. "Get to the door," I screamed. "Get out." Jenna knelt to pull me free, but the grip tightened, and I could feel a deep chill creeping up my leg. "No, leave me, please," I shouted, dread filling my voice as panic set in deeper. Mark hesitated for just a moment, a battle of insecurity playing across his features. But then something shifted. The shadows quivered like afraid animals. The man outside with the flashlight yelled again, more urgent this time. "Move now." In that split second, a jolt of adrenaline shot through me. I twisted and pulled, feeling the grip weaken. I gave one final shove and broke free. My heart raced as I clawed my way toward the back door, feeling the cold slip away. "Come on," Jenna cried as she surged up. Outside, the man swung the flashlight toward us, casting a wide arc that illuminated the area. The shadows recoiled, the flickering figure retreating back into the darkness. I pushed through the door, stumbling out into the open air. The relief was brief. The man's face was still obscured, but I could see determination in his stance. "They'll keep coming if you don't move." "What are they?" I gasped, desperate to know, unsure if survival was even possible at this point. "They're drawn to places like this," he answered, directing his gaze at the trees that lined the yard. "To people who invite them without knowing." His eyes narrowed under the flashlight beam. "You need to tell me everything." I turned back to Jenna and Mark, their expressions mirroring my terror. What do we do now? I whispered. I hoped you wouldn't find out, the man said, his tone barely concealing unease. Just as he spoke, the wind shifted, carrying a chilling laugh that echoed from the depths of the forest. I think they're not finished, I murmured, feeling the chill creep back in. It dawned on me then whatever we had disturbed, it wasn't just an accident. The darkness had its eyes on us now. I felt the weight of his words settle around us like a thick fog. The trees loomed larger, their dark branches swaying ominously in the night breeze. What do you mean, invited? I asked, trying to understand. Jenna shifted beside me, her breathing rapid and shallow. The man glanced toward the forest, scanning the edges where shadows flickered like restless spirits. Some things feed on fear, he said, his voice low. They take advantage of our curiosity. Stories like the ones you might have heard around the campfire. He paused, letting the implications sink in. I glanced at Mark, who had gone pale. We didn't we just wanted to hike. Yes, but you also wanted to explore, didn't you? To find things outside the ordinary. The man's gaze turned piercing, searching my face for understanding. That curiosity can draw them in. It's a beacon. And once they get a taste, they always come back for more. Then how do we stop them? Mark asked, desperation lining his voice. The man rubbed his chin, deep in thought. You've got to confront it. Find the source. Source? What source? I demanded, feeling the knot of fear tighten in my stomach. Before he could respond, the chilling laugh rose again, clearer this time. It echoed through the trees, sending shivers down my spine. It wasn't just laughter, it felt like a taunt. Stay close, the man ordered, and we instinctively pulled together, just as a low growl resonated from the shadows. They're testing us. What do you mean testing us? Jenna whispered, wide-eyed. He shook his head. They want to see if you'll turn back. They want to see if you're afraid enough to run. Don't show weakness. My heart was racing, each thump reminding me of our precarious situation. The flickering light of the flashlight seemed small against the vast darkness that closed in around us. I realized we were running out of options. With each moment, the shadows pressed closer, creeping in with a hunger that filled the air like a thick mist. Where's the source? I demanded, glancing nervously at the trees brimming with unseen menace. Is it in the house? In the woods? Possibly both, the man replied, but we can't be sure. We need to find something, a symbol, a marker. Look for anything unusual. Before I could question what he meant, something rustled in the underbrush behind us. I turned sharply, the flashlight beam flickering toward the sound. For a split second, I thought I saw a silhouette dart between two trees. Did you see that? I blurted. No time, the man commanded. We have to move. Just as we started to push deeper into the yard, I felt the ground tremble beneath me. A distant rumbling sound echoed from the direction of the forest. Something was coming. Over there. Jenna pointed to the spot where the shadows seemed to bulge and fold. I squinted into the dark, not sure if my mind was playing tricks. I think I began but was cut off as a surge of wind raced past us, howling like a furious beast. Run! The man shouted, and we bolted toward the tree line, fear spurring our legs faster than I thought possible. I could hear the laughter again, clearer and more taunting, mocking our every step as the shadows began to pour from the woods. Just as I dared to glance back, the beam of the flashlight illuminated one final thing. A figure standing among the trees, its smile stretching wide, a chilling promise that the worst was yet to come. We ran through the thick underbrush, each step heavier than the last. The man led us, his movements sure and purposeful, but I felt the panic rising at the back of my throat. A sense of urgency pushed us onward, but I could hear it, the haunting laughter closing in. Stay together, he shouted again, glancing back at us. Jenna was right beside me, her eyes wide with fright. I couldn't tell if I was more terrified of the figure in the woods or what was behind us. Another rumble, more pronounced this time. It sounded as if the whole forest was alive, breathing heavily, like it was about to swallow us whole. We need to find that symbol, the man shouted, gripping his flashlight tighter as he scanned the dark around us for anything that stood out. We made our way deeper into the trees, the branches scraping against our clothes, their whispers almost seeming to join in the mockery. I stumbled over a root, catching myself against a tree. "Keep moving," the man urged, his voice turning harsher. Then I spotted something ahead. Light. A faint glow flickered through the trees like a beacon. "There." I pointed, the hope bubbling up my throat. The man hesitated but then nodded. "That might be it. Move." As we pushed forward, the laughter echoed again. A cruel chorus that chilled me to my core. With every step, I feared we were drawing closer to whatever hunted us. I caught Mark's gaze. He looked just as scared as I felt. When we reached the clearing, we paused, staring at an ancient tree at the center. It loomed large, its gnarled branches reaching out in all directions. But it was the markings on its trunk that caught my attention. Symbols carved into the bark, intertwining spirals and jagged lines that felt wrong, like they didn't belong in this world. Those are the symbols," the man said, his tone shifting from urgency to a grim realization. "I've seen them in old texts. What do they mean?" I asked, scanning the carvings. The moment felt heavy, as if the air around us pulsed with some unseen energy. "They are markers," he replied slowly, stepping closer. "They can contain a power, but they can also invite something more sinister. We need to disrupt them." Before I could process his words, the ground beneath the tree began to quake. The laughter turned into a wild shriek, a forceful wind twisting around us as the shadows from the trees elongated. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet. "Focus," the man shouted over the chaos. "We have to break the symbols." "What do we do?" Jenna cried, clutching my arm as a shadow darted between the trees again. "Closer this time. Use whatever you can. This tree may be our only chance," he said, his eyes darting around, searching for something, anything that could help. In that moment, I felt a surge of defiance. I wasn't going to let fear control me. I scanned the ground and spotted a large rock, jagged and sharp. "This," I yelled, grabbing it. "Start there." The man pointed at the closest symbol. I took a deep breath and swung the rock at the tree. The impact sent a shudder through me, but more so through the tree itself. The moment the rock connected with the bark, the shriek turned into a guttural roar that shook the very leaves above. "Keep going," the man urged, stepping up beside me as Mark and Jenna followed suit, adding their force to the effort. As we struck at the tree, the air crackled around us, a fierce energy building like a storm. But I could feel something gathering in the shadows, looming behind us. It was watching. That when everything went eerily still. The laughter faded, and an unnatural silence fell. Only the sound of our labored breaths filled the void, and a cold chill swept through the clearing. "Something's coming," Jenna whispered, her voice trembling. And then I saw it. A figure emerging, its form shifting in and out of sight, like dark smoke swirling. My heart raced as I realized whatever had been watching wasn't far at all. I didn't want to look away from the figure, but I had to focus. We were still pounding at the tree, desperately trying to disrupt the symbols before it was too late. I could hear the shadows stirring around us, a low hum rising from the ground that vibrated through the air like a warning. "Keep hitting it," the man shouted, urgency creeping into his voice. "We have to break the connection." With each strike, I felt the weight of something ancient bearing down on us, the darkness coiling tighter, pressing against my lungs. My hand throbbed with each swing, but I didn't hesitate. Jenna and Mark were right beside me, and we were all in this together. I could sense the shadows closing in, the figure shifting at the edge of my vision. Then, with one final strike, I felt the solid crack beneath my rock. A pulse rippled through my body, and the air felt electric for a brief moment as the roar of anger erupted from the tree, resonating like a thunderclap. The shadows around us writhed in fury, the figure emerging more clearly now, a tall, twisted shape with hollow eyes that bore into me, as if it could see my very soul. "Get back," the man yelled, stepping in front of us, the flashlight glowing brighter in his grip. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the grotesque form that ducked and weaved, Its malicious grin growing wider. I could feel a chill wrapping around me, overwhelming my senses. "What does it want?" I shouted, trying to make sense of the horror unfolding. "It wants to break through," he yelled back, fear lacing his voice. "It thrives on the fear you've invited. You need to confront it." Confront it? I felt my stomach tighten, unsure if I was ready for that. All those moments in the woods, the whispers haunting our campsite, they felt like a prologue that had culminated in a living nightmare. Just then, the figure lunged forward, a surge of darkness spilling from its form like smoke. "No!" Mark shouted, raising the heavy rock we had used. He hurled it at the creature, and it collided with an unnatural force, the sound like glass shattering. The figure hissed, momentarily retreating into the shadows. "Don't let up," the man encouraged us. Our breaths came quick and fast, our resolve strengthening as the figure took shape again, shifting and morphing with malicious intent. "We have to believe we can fight it," I yelled over the frenzy. "We take back our fear." With newfound grit, we rallied together. Striking at the tree, shouting in defiance, we focused our energy on breaking the connection. Jenna shouted loudest, "You don't control us." And with those words, a wave of conviction pushed me to swing my rock again, feeling the shadows recoil. But just as the last cymbal cracked, the figure darted forward, and in a blink, I felt something cold wrap around my throat. I gasped, the grasp of fear tightening like a vice. I could see the figure's jagged edges closing in, ready to snuff out our fight. In a moment of panic, I reached deep within, recalling the laughter we heard, the whispers that haunted us. "We do not fear you," I screamed, my voice raw but resonating with strength. It was a primal shout, fueled by the memories of our camping trip, the unity of friendship. And then something shifted. The very air pulsed as the cymbals throbbed, glowing a blinding white light from the depths of the tree. The shadows hesitated, and that when I felt a rush within me, a connection to the fearful curiosity that had drawn us to this nightmare in the first place. I stood tall, letting the illumination surge through my legs and into my heart. I pulled Jenna and Mark close, the warmth of companionship grounding me. Together, we stepped forward, hands entwined, standing against the darkness. "We're stronger than fear," the figure screamed, a sound that resonated through the gathering storm of shadows. The collective energy we released washed away the malevolence like ink in water. The light surged, blinding and pure, and I could hear the whispers scattering, retreating into the distance. With one last defiant shout, we embraced the light. The shadows writhed and twisted, then vanished, leaving echoes of lingering dread in the air, the darkness seeping back into the woods. But we were free. As we stepped out of the clearing, panting and disoriented, I felt a sense of resolve. I glanced back at the ancient tree, now stripped of its sinister symbols, its bark smoothed and harmless. "Is it really over?" Jenna asked, her voice trembling but hopeful. "I don't know," the man answered, scanning the forest one last time. The shadows seemed to ripple against the trees, but there was no threat lingering. "But I think we'll always carry a piece of this with us now." I nodded slowly, a strange sense of acceptance washing over me. We may have escaped, but those shadows weren't gone, just hidden, waiting for the next curious souls to wander too close. Even in the light, I sensed the weight of an unanswered question hovering in the air. Had we truly defeated them, or merely pushed them back? We walked away from the forest, the cool night air heavy with uncertainty. The forest seemed to sigh in our absence, its dark lips curling into a shadow of a smile, leaving a haunting echo in my mind. I glanced back one last time, and though I couldn't see them anymore, I could feel the whispers lurking somewhere beyond, ready to call out again. I moved to a different city soon after, the memories lingering, shadows etched into my mind. I'm not the same, not after what happened. I guess I never will be, not while those whispers carry on.